All right. Welcome, A Little Crazy Podcast. Life is often hard for everybody in one way or another, and we're always looking for ways to get out of that hard. You know, if you could just swallow a pill. Oh, but sometimes you can. And I did that. But what I found is it brought me more hard. That's what we're talking about today, my addiction to Adderall, and then Vyvanse, which is a sister drug of it. So we'll talk about that and about how it altered my life and what I did, how I got off of it. The Phoebe Goodwin. Hello, Phoebe.
David.
So, what? You have to be a little crazy to do a whole podcast episode to talk about your addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I almost, as I was coming up here today, in my mind, I wanted to message you and say, let's change subjects. I mean, it's kind of messy.
Yeah.
It's kind of messy.
But that's what this whole show is for, where we just dig into the mess of life and find where the beauty came from.
Hard is hard, and people experience in a lot of ways. But again, here's the thing about human nature. We don't like pain, and we don't like discomfort, and we don't like failure. And so we're always looking for something close at hand to alleviate that, to change it, to make it better. And that is how I ended up at middle age on an Adderall prescription that ruined my life.
Mm.
Now, here's what I tell everybody on the front end, and I need to say it here. This is not about making any judgment. If somebody listening is on Adderall or Vyvanse, or their child is, I'm not creating any stigma. We got to say that on the front end.
Right, for sure.
All medications were created for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
They came to the marketplace because people need them, and some people legitimately need them. Whether I did or whether I should have had it remains to be seen. So here's the setup, Phoebe. I'm approaching my mid-40s, and life had gotten messy. So to that point, I'd always been afraid of illegal drugs. I drank alcohol, and I'd been drinking more alcohol in the sense of when I was your age, I would just drink occasionally with friends or big events, or I didn't just start opening a bottle of wine, say, every night, or having a glass of wine with every meal, and then it snuck into another glass. But by the time I'd gotten to my mid-40s, I thought that's what you do. You just have some evening, crack open some wine. So that turns into a daily habit. But it was still in the, couple of glasses range, unless I was at some big event. But midlife hits. All of a sudden, it feels hard, life does. Professionally, I'm unsure of what I want to do. I'm an adopted child, and there's a lot of relational things surfacing in my family that I grew up in. And it's dark and it's heavy. My 3 children, they're teenagers, and they're both flourishing in many respects, but struggling in others. And I feel that pressure. I feel all the pressure that a lot of people do when they're married with a family. You can be with the person you want to be with, of course. You can have sometimes even the work you want to do. But sometimes it feels so much you want to run away. You want to get away. So I end up at a doctor for the first time. And I just didn't understand the concept of coming clean and saying, I should have revealed my alcohol use because maybe they don't give me a powerful stimulant. I didn't. Maybe I should have revealed some depression. I didn't. What I said was, if I could just get my life organized, if I could just finish this book I'm working on, if. So I leave at middle age with a prescription of Adderall. And I take that first pill, and I'm on fire.
What did it feel like the first time you took it?
Oh, if you lined up, I mean, I don't drink, but if you lined whiskey and wine bottles in here, I'm not going to be tempted. And I don't think I would be tempted if you lined up Adderall bottles, but I'll be honest, when you just said that and my brain goes back, it remembers. I mean, that is a powerful stimulant. And what it felt like is, for the first time, I was wide awake and clear. And I finished my book. And I found a focus and energy and clarity that I felt like my eyes were wide open and I was so alert that I thought I would never go another day without this miracle drug. I felt like I was thinking more clearly, and I was thinking that it felt so electric that a few months later, I'm back at the doctor and I'm just saying, I think we should up that prescription because it worked so well. And he does. And I just did not have any relationship with addiction in my life. My alcohol use had been creeping up. But then I'm on this stronger prescription. And it started with Adderall, not Vyvanse. I wake up, I take it, bam. I'm electric. Now, I don't know anything much in the world going on around me. I'm staring at what I'm staring at, and I'm tackling that. But about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that very powerful stimulant begins to wear off. And as magical as it was those first few times I took that pill and that stimulant lighted me up, the opposite begins to happen at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock when that Adderall begins to wear off and it's pulling away from my body. It doesn't feel good. And so initially, strangely enough, I start seeking nicotine to try to give an artificial boost to that. And I remember my late son, William, maybe catching me once and saying something like, who starts smoking in their mid-40s? What, you got this new habit?
He's got a point.
I mean, who does that? But I was looking for an artificial stimulant for the stimulant. I'm trying to jack that thing back up that's leaving me. And then come 5 o'clock, I need more alcohol to try to wash away that creepy, creepy feeling of how it's going away and leaving me. It was so interesting that if there was a camera rolling of me, you would take a 6-month period and you would just watch the degradation of a human. And it was all this one thing. And while I would some days double up, I mostly used it as prescribed. But if I went to, say, a big party on a Friday night and stayed late and had too many to drink and laugh with friends, maybe the next day I'm taking one, and by 3 o'clock when it's wearing off, I'm like, And I'm taking half of another or some more. And so that becomes quickly misuse, and then you're in a cycle. But I never bought it on the street. I never did anything illegal. I just was fighting to protect and keep that intact and push it to use it maybe a little faster than I should, But there's no manual on this. And there was no manual that came with this prescription that even said, beware of these things. And my whole personality began to change. I remember my daughter, I think maybe I said this on the first episode we recorded. What happened is after 6 months, people noticed I was different. My weight declined because my appetite declined. My personality declined. I got a little more edgy. I could be a quick trigger when I never was before. And I lost interest in some things. Number one, I was so focused. Whatever happened inside my computer interested me. Whatever happened inside my phone interested me. Whatever project I was working on interested me. But it was hard to get beyond that, you know. And so I look at, you know, so many young people. I mean, there's something like 40-something million prescriptions of Adderall written in America these days. And parents will come to me when they hear this story and they say, wait a minute, do I need to go get my child off of that? And I say, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess the question is, you might want some accurate diagnosis. Because if you're just telling some characteristics and essentially talking the doctor into giving it to you, then they're going to give it. And what you don't know is how it might or might not alter their personality. And so for me, it was this incredibly altering thing. Number one, it had me chasing nicotine. Number two, it had me greatly increasing my alcohol. And then I'm having this conversation with my daughter, and I realize I don't feel the same anymore. It was a powerful stimulant. It had taken how I feel away from me. And, you know, I was a creative person and an empathetic person and a person who feels, and then I was someone who didn't feel at all. It made me fairly calloused, in fact. And my behavior, you know, then declined in most every way. And I'll meet students a lot, and students will tell me, you know, the studies are very clear that that even when it's prescribed as it should be, I mean, if you take a powerful stimulant, it comes with risks. I mean, even used properly, even when it should be diagnosed, no human is going to take a powerful stimulant like that and do it without risk. You know, it is very prone for misuse. A lot of people will sell it to others, you know, and maybe they don't have a prescription. It can lead to other behaviors. So what I did, the doctor's beginning to see, this guy's struggling with this. So he switches me to Vyvanse, which is supposed to be non-addictive. But that wasn't true. It was just less addictive. It was just less addictive. There was a difference. It was longer running. But anybody that says this isn't addictive, me and a whole lot of people who've been on Vyvanse where they're opening up those pills and dropping some powder off tomorrow's pill just to try to get a little more in them to get through the day, doesn't know. Because it is addictive. It's just less so. It's just less so. And, you know, it had its own issues. I would take those pills and taste metal. Like if you ask me about taking Adderall the first day, I was like, oh, I remember it. It was like somebody just turned on all the lights, really bright, and I could just see detail everywhere. What I remember from Vyvanse is just tasting metal.
That's not as fun. That is not as fun.
Well, who wants to taste metal?
Yeah,
it just totally, it was not good. It was not good at all. But it's not, you know, you could tell this story, and again, everybody's temptation is to run, grab their child or their spouse and say, get off of this. I'm not saying that. I'm telling my story. Here's the thing. It's overprescribed, period. It is overprescribed, and it is incredibly misused. But some people, it helps them function. It helps people with ADHD in a severe manner. It helps them organize, function, get through the day, get through work. Absolutely. However, like all things, when it's misused, it's a problem. And for me, I'm asked so many times, how did everything go wrong for you? How did everything go wrong? Everybody close to me will tell you it wasn't going that well before Adderall, but it would have been like, say, on a scale of 1 to 10, somebody approaching middle age. It was not great. It was maybe a 5. In some ways, I'm flourishing. In some ways, there's challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm functioning. The moment I took that first pill and the light switch went on, everything else began to descend into darkness.
Mm.
And so if you mark I remember there was one friend she was a close friend, and I hadn't seen her maybe for 8 months. I was with her right before I started, and then I was at a writers conference down on 30A that I'd helped put together. I was down there, and I see her again, and she was saying, "Well, what's wrong with you?
Mm.
Are you on drugs?" And I got so defensive about that. No, I'm not on drugs. I was so hurt and so bothered that she was questioning, because she's looking at me and I'm shriveling. But I was on drugs. It was just doctor prescribed.
Yeah, and I think there's an illusion that if it's prescribed, then it's fine. And you forget that even over-the-counter medicine has addictive qualities. And so when did you catch that something was up?
You
had an issue?
The person who's struggling, Phoebe, the person that's struggling with addiction is the last to know.
Mm.
They're always the last to know. And here's what happens. Your brain gets hooked on this Adderall and then turned to Vyvanse. Even if it's brought to your brain's attention that there's a problem,
mm-hmm.
your brain doesn't want to let it go. And it will fight for that. And it will swear things have never been better.
Mm.
I remember someone telling me once, well, just like my friend, another who thought I was struggling, another friend kind of let me look in the mirror, and they said, I know you're having a hard time. And I was like, no, I'm not.
Mm.
No, I'm okay. So you're often the last to know. But what happens is when you take a powerful stimulant, so let's just think of what the name is, stimulant. Your brain is stimulated so
mm-hmm.
you don't think something's wrong. It's not a depressant.
Mm-hmm.
You wake up every morning and light up your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So your brain in that time frame's like, hello, we're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
We've never been better, until it's time for that drug to wear off. And then it says, I'm not doing so well. Could you get some more in here?
Yeah.
So I was the last to know, but yet they don't tell you when you start taking those pills that if you're a drinker, you're highly likely to drink more. And I mean, you've just come out of college. I gave this talk once to a group of students, and some girl grabbed me over to the side. She's like, okay, seriously, we pregame by snorting Adderall before we go out. And, I'm just now thinking maybe there's something wrong with that. And so the students are, A, they're snorting it. B, it's not necessarily their pills. There's things wrong with all of that. There's really no different in doing that than, cocaine that's off the street. It's misused. It's not used properly. And they're telling me this, though, and you should have seen my face. It was a lot like that. And I'm thinking, no, that is not okay. But they're doing it so they can go to the bar and just drink and not feel it, right?
Mm.
And a lot of that for me is nobody told me that. I was just this middle-aged guy trying to finish a book and deal with the pressure I was feeling about the mortgage, the fact that my teenagers were battling life, the fact that my marriage was struggling, the fact that I didn't know my own identity, the fact that I had cheated on my wife. I was trying, the fact that I wrote a book that wasn't good enough, I was trying to manage all of that. And there's this pill someone handed me. A doctor, which is comical. I wonder why the doctor, it seems like sometimes they should just ask you some questions. And I realize, say, that kind of doctor is not the kind that's supposed to get into your head, but just handing over a pill is a little problematic. Mm-hmm. But that's what happened. Now, I did go see a psychiatrist, by the way, but it was really just about ADHD. We didn't get into the other stuff. Mm-hmm. He asked me, do you ever face battle depression? And I did not give him an honest answer. Mm-hmm. No. How much do you drink? Not that much. Which, frankly, I thought was true. Because I thought everybody else I knew drank more than I did. I was thinking, I don't know, have a few glasses of wine at night. Mm-hmm. Maybe in the weekend I go to a party, have more. Mm-hmm. That's what everybody did. But then I have this pill. I'm dealing with life. And what I know now is I should have gone through and done adjustments in 6 or 7 or 8 different areas. It wasn't one thing. There is no magical pill. Mm. There's no such thing. Yeah. And so when you want an easy way out, and if it's too good to be true, often it is. Mm. And I would take this stimulant and I had big dark circles under my eyes. And I would walk in somewhere and people who were always like, hey, David, and so glad to see me, they were kind of tilting their head and looking at me. Hey, man, how you doing? Mm. This one thing, yes, I had issues, but this one thing took me to a depth of despair beyond what I ever could have imagined.
Mm. And it all started with the lights turning on and so quickly descended.
Because you want them again.
Mm-hmm. You'll do anything to feel
Well, I said I remember saying in the first weeks, this was the best medicine I'd ever had. Mm. Medicine. So that reminds me, there's somebody, a gentleman in an adjacent state who had read my book, Dear William. And he had seen that I'd struggled with Adderall, and I've told this story before, but it's worth repeating. He started on Adderall in his 20s, got a prescription from a doctor, and he became addicted to it. Mm. And soon he began buying it on the street. But when he's buying it on the street, of course, it had fentanyl in it because they don't have the chemicals to make real Adderall. So it's essentially meth plus fentanyl. So the meth part jacks you up like Adderall. It's the stimulant. Then they put some fentanyl in it to make it highly addictive, so you keep coming back to it. But they called it Adderall, and they sold it as Adderall. And when I talked to him and we realized, okay, you need serious help. You are struggling on meth and fentanyl, even though they call it Adderall. But all the way through, even as he got out of treatment, he would say that he had been misusing his medicine because it started as medicine from a doctor and a pharmacist. But it moved to this other thing. In his mind, he never transferred the term. It was still medicine. And I never used the term medicine, but I did feel a safety in the fact that it was from a doctor and from my pharmacy. Mm. And that made it better. But that's how really I began to look in the mirror eventually and realize this is a drug. I'm on a trip across the country with my son William, who'd been struggling with drugs himself, illegal drugs. Mm-hmm. And I remember once saying to him, as I'm trying to talk to him, I remember saying, William, I've never used illegal drugs. I'm afraid of illegal drugs. I've never used drugs. And he gave me this look as I'm popping that daily Adderall in my mouth. He knew I'm telling him I had not used drugs like I'm judging his misuse of cocaine, when anybody will tell you there's very little difference between the two.
Mm.
Maybe mine came from a pharmacist and his came from the street, so at least I knew what was in mine, but I'm misusing it the same way.
Mm.
It's doing the same damage. And that was what his glare was about. You can't tell me, I could read his mind in that glare. You can't tell me, Dad, you've never done drugs when you're sitting here hooked on this prescription. That's a drug. But as I'm saying all this to him, and it's all coming back to me, eventually in that trip, I just realized I'm no different than him. What I'm wanting him to stop, I'm doing the very same thing with alcohol. It may be legal, but at that point, I had started misusing it. This Adderall, then Vyvanse prescription, it might be legal, it might be from a doctor, but I'm misusing it.
Yeah, and something I feel like we've seen so much with the guests we've had on the podcast is no one wakes up in the morning and is like, I want to go be an addict today.
I've never met the first person.
But it just happens so slowly, and it's so easy to spot in other people, but when it comes to you, you always think you're an exception. Well, yeah, that might be too much wine, but that was just once. Or...
And I won't do that the next time.
I won't do it, and I was with people. Or, yeah, I took another pill, but, like, work is really hard, and I've got to get through this. And then anything becomes an excuse. A hard day, a good day, a long day, a short day.
Everything becomes an excuse. If I could just get to the end of the day, if I could get to the end of the month, if I could just get that next job, if I could just get this relationship solved.
And it just takes harder work than that, you know?
It takes harder work than that. And what you realize is there is no pill. There is no pill. And for me, I have had, frankly, I tell everybody, if you or your child has had a legitimate diagnosis and you need it, use it. But I'm not going to lie. I'm not a big fan. Because I see people's personality change. So maybe they don't reach the point I did, but I see a lot of personalities changed from it. And yeah, you can make better grades. Listen, a student's on it, they will make better grades. My goodness, I'm not a good student. I mean, I could do things that I couldn't do. But then what happens is I couldn't do so many things that I can do.
Yeah, it sounds like it took so many of the essential parts of who you were in exchange for productivity and efficiency.
I would have sworn, and in fact I did to my daughter, as I started to mention earlier, I told her, I don't think I will ever feel again. And she just looked at me, and I think she said, Dad, I will pray for you. She was in high school. Can you imagine placing that burden on your daughter? And I believed it. I thought I had lost that empathy and I'd lost those feelings. I believed it. And, you know, I was so strayed from faith. What I can tell you is when I was young in church and people would talk about the devil, it almost ran me out of church because I pictured this little red guy and I thought, there's no such thing. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. I can't deal with this church thing. Well, when I eventually started figuring it out, I realized this is the devil. It had taken my soul. It had taken my life. It had taken my feelings. It had taken every single thing good about me. All of it. And so I tell people a lot of times when they ask me in regard to their children, like, sure, you have a diagnosis, you need it, take it. But are you willing to let their brain get programmed to rely on what is an exceptionally powerful stimulant? Because if they rely on that at 14, if they rely on that for 12, for heaven's sakes, if they rely on that at 20, how are they going to cope and deal with life? Because the studies are pretty clear. It's not the ideal thing to be taking something. It will change the composition of your brain. It's not like you're going to successfully take this for 50, 60 years. It's so strong. And so for me though, when I finally realized I had to get off of it on that trip with William, and I just did it by throwing the bottle in the trash can and thought, I just have to be strong enough to do this. And it was rough for a few days. I tried to fill the void with more nicotine. And honestly, that kind of helped work to wean off. But what happened is I also realized I needed to stop drinking. And so just as that it was this negative cycle this way, when I began to get rid of it, I was able to start backtracking off all of it. And I think the giveaway for me of how powerful it was, how powerful this stimulant was, besides the fact that it cost me everything, my TV show I was hosting, my family, my relationships, people's trust with me, it cost me everything. This prescription from a doctor cost me everything. But the thing is, what really got my attention is how my mind behaved after. Because for a little bit, you're sort of, when you've been on a high dose like I was, you're not quite thinking clearly. You're sort of thinking clearly, but not quite. And it made me realize, if I'm having this level of withdrawal where my mind can't function quite normally after it, then it was doing something significant to me. You know?
Yeah, and I think we all just want a quick fix, and it feels like the right thing, and then a couple weeks down the road, you're someone you don't recognize anymore.
There is no quick fix in life. I mean, I wish there was. Sure.
Same.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was. I could list a few things right now.
Yeah.
You know, if I have a few on my list right now, I would love to do a quick fix. Maybe for one of them there could be, but I can tell you, I've been afraid of some things. Like, I don't easily fall for the doctor. So I'll have a friend, and again, I'm not judging them, but they'll say, look, I'm taking this injections, I'm losing weight, but it's causing me these stomach issues. And I'll say, well, how's that going? And some people will say it's going perfectly fine. But I've had some that say it's not good, but it's working.
Yeah.
And I'm having all these stomach issues. My stomach doesn't digest right. And I'm thinking back to my days. And I'm just like, I can't do it. I'm not judging anybody that does, but the quick fix scares me. I'm frightened by it because it hasn't gone well for me. My quick fix got me in a quick pile of trouble. It was bad. And it's taken me years. So I've been off of Adderall and Vyvanse now for 14 years.
Wow.
This is my you know why I wanted to do this episode? This week is pretty much my 14th anniversary.
Wow. That's amazing.
14 years, Phoebe. And
you've lived like 16 lives.
16 lives. I think about I wonder, like, I'm getting old, but I think of all the lives I've been through, I think there's this whole other few left at a minimum. There's no telling what's ahead for me, because I have experienced life that it can be interesting and diverse, sometimes not good. 14 years ago.
Wow.
This week. Incredible. I wish I could list all of the good things that have happened to me since I threw that bottle away. Have I suffered pain in that 14 years? Absolutely. Death of a child, cancer, still battling what am I supposed to do with my life? But even when it's hard, it's good. All of those negative things just went away when I threw that bottle away. And I was at that moment, and I remember doing it. I was at a gas station. I throw that bottle away, flush the last pills. And when you're doing it in that moment, you're desperate for better. You are desperate for better. Mm-hmm. But it's still a wing and a prayer. You don't know what's coming. You just are desperate for better. I'm here to tell you, 14 years later, whatever they promise when they hand you that prescription, I can tell you that all of the promises of what I hoped for and expected, plus 1,000 times better, happened in the 14 years since I threw that away. And I have not had one single Adderall or Vyvanse pill since.
That's amazing.
And I have not been tempted to because it was so bad. And I remember that searing kind of metal taste in my brain just, So look, there is no quick solution. And whenever you think it's hard, it can be better. But I wish a pill was the answer, but it's not. And I mean, sometimes they're needed, granted, but more times than not, I do not think a pill is the solution. In next episode, we're going to dig into one of my favorite topics, and I think it's yours. I'll find out when we do it. This is the hard part in how I got in trouble with the Adderall. Next week, we're going to talk about all the good that unfolds when you just let yourself be as you were created to be. We're going to talk about why I love ADHD and why I don't think anybody should mute it. Follow us on social. Sign up for our newsletter, alittlecrazy.com. It's easy. Put in your email address. It's free. We'll keep you updated on the podcast and more. And come see us next week for sure, as we talk about why I love ADHD. We will see you then.